All right. 3, 2, 1.
Drum roll, please.
Welcome to the Backseat playlist, season 1.
Episode 3, sub-series, Blue Collar Audio, episode 2. I'm good at marketing. Believe me.
Subsection 1-2. We're using the Dewey Decimal System on this one on YouTube. So,
Season 1.
Redux.
Redux. Article 2.
Section B.
Episode something.
And if you're not confused, now you will be as we go further along.
Give it some time.
Give it some time. Your brain will hurt as much as ours do.
Comment on our Instagram page at Reflections Artist Collective at what minute and second mark you actually gave up listening.
I would love to see that. It's all of them are like 20 seconds.
Didn't even start it.
We're going to have a bunch of comments from people that didn't even watch it. We're like, look at all these people that commented. We're like, oh, wait, they didn't even watch it.
Yeah. I can see not who watches it, but I can see how many people watch it.
We know when you're watching, and we know when you're sleeping.
I know. YouTube sends me updates every Sunday.
Yeah, we have all of your biometric data. You guys are screwed.
I'm data mining all of you.
Yes, that's really what this is.
Yeah,
We're working for the Chinese government.
Pretty much, yeah. I thought it was like, maybe if I have a podcast where I have intelligent discussions about audio, it can be used as some sort of like virtual business card where I can be like, future client be like, well, how much do you actually know about sound? We'll be like, well, you can listen to me babble about it for hours on end. And then I realized, yeah, if I just data mine my subscribers, I'll make way more money. So, joke's on you, chumps.
If I commit human rights violations, I will get a lot further in life.
Yeah, the old Christian rock motto, if you can't beat them, ruin it. And that's what I'm doing.
Speaking of Christian rock, I guess they didn't even classify themselves as one, but Creed. Still love him. Scott's, dude, you could do a whole story about Scott Stapp and his mental breakdowns, him believing the CIA is after him, and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Meth? Question mark?
I don't know, but we should film as part of our channel, we should do like a parody where one of us is Scott Stapp and we film the story of him, but we frame it like it is true. Like he's actually being hunted by the CIA.
And
then we intersperse covers of Creed.
I don't know how active you were on like YouTube back in the day, but I think it's the guy who like started Consequence of Sound, would do like Tuesday updates on YouTube or whatever, and he did a parody video where he interviewed Scott Stapp, and he was like totally in character.
That's
like
amazing.
It was hilarious.
One of the shows my band played when we were at Baltimore Soundstage, we were back in the green room, and we found this letter from the night before when I believe it was Dillinger Escape Plan had played.
Okay,
pretty sure it was Dillinger. Or no, it was from 2 nights prior because Dillinger had played, and then the following night Scott Stapp was going to be there doing his solo show.
You told me the story.
And so Dillinger, one of the guys in Dillinger, left this horrific note for Scott Stapp telling him he sounds fucking terrible. He's a horrible person. His music sucks. He's a has-been. They committed violence with that letter. And apparently Scott read it and then left it in the green room. And so then we were there the night before. So, of course, I licked every single couch just to make sure that I got some of Scott Stapp on my tongue.
That's fair.
And I got Scott Stapp infection.
Oh.
I did it. We did it. Press the button.
And done.
But, that was pretty cool to see. What do you call it? Hate mail between famous artists.
That's fair. I should mention that the Christian rock joke is an old Pete Holmes joke. I didn't come up with it.
And now we're going to get sued.
Gotta give... No.
We're pulling a Carlos... what was his name?
I gave... Mencia?
Carlos Mencia?
No, I gave him props. Just now, I had to let you finish your story first because I'm trying to be a polite host where I don't talk over my guests, co-host. Yeah.
Like, what are you calling a guest?
We
talked about this prior to the show that you brought me on as a full partner because I'm willing to do the weird stuff.
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it. Someone has got to be...
Both of us are actually probably at that point.
Someone's got to be the wild card.
Yeah.
And that is me. You don't know. I might stab myself on air one day.
I don't know if that makes me the brains or the looks, but...
I might pull a Cobain. You don't even know.
Take it.
Just on camera.
Gone.
And then you can then pull a... what was the band? Was it Death? No, it wasn't Death. It was one of those black metal bands where they used, like, for one of their album covers, they used a photo of their previous member who blew his head off, and they're like, this is a great album cover.
It's black metal.
They were for real, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like the old 90s, like hardcore, like gangster hip-hop guys, where it was like, I mean,
Most of
nowadays,
them-
like
I-
most of them were like legit. It was like I killed a man, and like yeah, no, they literally just admitted to a crime that they actually did, and so it made it a little more hardcore. Whereas nowadays, like you hear these guys, and you're like, bro,
No, you
you
didn't.
grew up in the valley. Shut up.
Yeah.
Like we know you're fake. Like
I
your
love
music might be okay, but
I love it when 90s hardcore rappers go soft, but then they still try to rap like they're
like Ice Cube.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, you aren't Are We There Yet? Like, come on, man.
But
Love ya.
props to them. That I mean, being in Are We There Yet's probably a way better life than being on the streets of Compton.
Oh yeah, no, I would have done it too.
No judgment at all.
It's a joke because like all reality, like dude, Ice Cube's the man. Like,
Yeah.
how about Ice-T, right? Like Ice-T's had become an actor.
Yeah.
Dude, did you ever watch that? Probably not. I used to watch this with my mom sometimes, but he had that reality show, Ice Loves Coco. It was him and his wife.
Yeah, it was
just a
on
reality
like
show
it
about
wasn't
them.
on was it it wasn't VH
I want to say it was on like
was it VH1 or MTV or one of them?
one of those,
Yeah.
or like E, might have been on E or something like that. But it's like, yo, he's on Law and Order, and he's got this reality show, and then crap, his band just released a new single. Will Putney worked with him, right?
Oh yeah,
Somebody help us out there.
Yep. Look
You
it
know
up.
Yeah.
Will just
Well,
Google
yeah.
Ice-T
Ice-T's
band
band.
Will Putney.
Yeah, great. It's heavy as hell. It won an award, I think, this past year.
I should check it out more. I feel like
Or it was nominated. It was nominated. I think it was nominated for a Grammy. I think.
yeah, I like digitally needle dropped it where I like played it and then I skipped and I was like, I got something else to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my thing, but respect.
It might be cool.
So last episode,
Good
I don't know the
segue.
time of stuff. Last week we talked about kick drums. We were doing a little series here. We're gonna go down the chain of command of recording, and not necessarily the chain of like performance, preamp, microphone, yada yada, but just 1 through however many channels you got on your interface for recording a band.
Yeah.
And today we are on to
The most controversial I can talk topic probably in drum recording.
the thing that makes me want to kill myself.
I've definitely gotten in arguments over this topic.
I have definitely cried.
Probably lost friendships over this topic.
Is this going to be the end of the Backseat playlist right here?
Possibly.
Are we going to get ready to start this? I'm going to read my playlist at the end, and you're going to be like, no, I'm not putting that on there.
Whew, a hard FU your way. No.
But wait, before we talk, okay, so real quick, I guess, one of the greatest snare sounds, one of my favorite snare sounds, is on a couple of records. I didn't put them on my list, but we should talk about this because everybody else in the world's talking about this. Every Time I Die broke up. Snare sound.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's
okay.
not talk
Adam
about
doesn't
it.
want to. I was going to cry. But I just want to say they had some amazing drum sounds, amazing guitar sounds, but all around just really, really cool records.
One, probably the best to ever do it in that genre of music, in my opinion.
I mean, they're so influential.
Moment of silence.
Moment of silence. And we're back.
Moment over.
Moment over. Just like Every Time I Die. Oh, God. All right. So where do we want to start today with talking about snare drums? Adam, you are the resident drumagog, drum player.
Yeah, sorry, you just made me sad before we started. So.
Oh, man. Yeah, he is real sad. All right. Well, maybe I will do a little dance. Now, what are we looking up here?
My show.
My show notes. This is why we have the notebooks.
Yeah, well, it's too big of a topic to fit in a 3.5 by 5 inch
That's
notebook.
true, yeah. Maybe once we get enough investment, we can buy ourselves some iPads and we can have little iPads on there with show notes. Like the professionals.
Patreon.com/Reflections Artist Collective. All donations get you behind the scenes content, early access to podcasts and future videos. And we're not going to pocket.
You also get the pre-show.
Pre-show. I'm including that behind the scenes.
Okay, cool.
And we're not going to pocket it for our own income. It's all going to go to tech stuff to help us
get out of the basement.
make stuff that you all enjoy. Tell your friends.
Tell them all.
Open your wallets.
Open your wallets and open your hearts. Get ready to smell my farts.
Yeah.
All
right.
That's why you come here. You don't come here for the audio. You come here for the potty humor.
That's about right, you know.
If you donate, we will be able to get one of those sound things. I don't even know what they're called, but I want to be the guy that just sits here. Adam's a video guy. I'm the sound guy in terms of not the audio guy, but just I'm gonna press the buttons to make the sounds, and Adam's gonna have to reprimand me after every show. Be like, dude, you gotta cool it.
You gotta cool it
You
with
gotta
the
cool
sound
it, man.
effects. All right, I have my settings pulled up. I had like auto lock on my phone, and it was set to 30 seconds.
We could do a whole episode. I just realized because I looked over at your phone. Using Google Drive or Dropbox. Oh, that could start some arguments.
Yeah.
I use Google Drive. I know a lot of people complain about it, and I've looked at switching to Dropbox because I do appreciate the I don't know what you call it, the native built-in, like on Mac at least. When you download it, you can go up to the toolbar and you can open up that little menu thing that Apple does, and I really like that. But I don't know, it just seems easier to me because almost everybody I know has a Gmail account, so it just I don't know.
If it's an extensive project, probably Dropbox.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it's more actively involved, but I mean, for writing show notes and
Yeah. Well, I mean for transferring files. So for mixing.
Oh,
for
yeah,
mixing,
yeah.
For mixing, you use Dropbox.
It kind of depends. I usually leave it up to the client. If it's mix heavy, probably Dropbox, just because there's more. I mean, also you can use one of those like WeTransfer or WeSend It.
Yeah. No,
I like that if the other person has a Mac. Sometimes those websites are weird for Windows.
Okay.
Like if you're crossing platforms, it's strange. But if you're going, Mac OS to Mac OS or Windows to Windows, it seems to be smoother.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going from one to the other, it gets...
Yeah, I mean, I've used Google Drive and I haven't had any issues. No one's brought any issues to my attention. And it seems pretty easy to at least just like if someone wants to add someone to the folder, you can easily just be like, yeah, just send me their email and bang, do it immediately.
I like the privileges that you can assign to, where like some people can edit, some people can just view, other people can just leave
I like
a comment.
that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no... The only problem I have with Drive is that you get like 15 gigs or whatever.
It's not a lot. You got to do a lot of cleanup constantly.
Yeah. But I also... I mean, I could buy... Like, you can buy more storage, but I also appreciate that like 15's enough to get you through an album.
Well,
And it also forces you to just be...
Dropbox? Isn't Dropbox less than that?
I think it's 10 for free, and then you can spend $10 a month and get 50. I think.
Interesting.
I'm not sure.
All right, well...
Yeah.
Let us
Total.
know. Let us know in the comments section what you use.
Total side tangent to the topic.
I know, right? But all right, on to snare drums.
Take
me away, Adam.
Snare drums.
Take me to my nightmare.
Yeah.
It is like a relationship. When it's good, oh man, it's the best thing ever. Snares, it's just like if the snare in a mix is good, oh god, it's great. But if it's bad, the rest of your mix could be great, but if you've got the wrong snare sample, if you've got the wrong snare drum, it just kills me. And that happens a lot with my own mixes where I will be all right, yeah.
Snares there could be an entire series of snares.
Oh yeah.
And as we end every episode with a playlist, I texted Phoenix earlier this morning, I think, and I said I had a list of 50 snare drums, snare sounds that I like. So I'm going to maybe clarify something I didn't say in the first episode, is that these aren't necessarily what we think is definitively the best sound of any particular instruments when we reference them.
Oh, yeah, no.
This is just, I have, 5 or 10 go-to references of songs that I'm familiar with, so I know, like, in the mix, this type of snare sound should be doing X, Y, or Z when I go to mix. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't think there is no perfect snare. There's no perfect anything.
It's purely a reference to be like, I'm in the ballpark where this snare that I recorded, or kick drum, or tom, or whatever, is definitely mixable.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get to our playlist today because I've got some examples that, honestly, if we would have done this about 2 weeks ago, I know I would have picked a lot of different stuff. But I had started a playlist of some stuff, and I noticed some things, and I was like, huh. I'm not necessarily, like, on one of these examples, and I'll get to it, is like the snare is not at all what you would expect for this genre of music.
Right.
But that's what, and all of a sudden, it makes the song. It makes the song so much more unique and original. And I think that's important, is that, going into this, there are definitely, we'll call them industry standards, genre standards of, hey, if you're going for a heavy metal mix, you know, you definitely want this kind of snare sound because it'll cut through, it'll lay down the weight. If you've got, you know, a more low key, something like a John Mayer or the song I really love. It's not in my list because it doesn't have a snare drum, but the new Jack White song, "Love Is Selfish," something like that. Amazing song. Check that out. But you know, those kind of vibes, like the snares can be totally different, and so it's again, as everything, genre dependent. The vibe.
The snare is really the personality and voice of a drum set. I think it's definitely, if you only have time to tune one drum, which take time to tune all of your drums, but if you only
budget
have like
that in,
like that's the one thing that, other than cymbals, which we'll cover in a later episode, but there was a side tangent about that, I think, in the kick drum episode.
Yeah, I'm excited for cymbals.
The problem you can encounter with snare drums, I feel, is that you can always tuck in a sample to augment it, but they have to play well together.
Oh yeah, and you're not talking about just like not just phase, but tonality,
tuning,
pitch,
yeah,
characteristics.
Yeah,
I think I find a lot of times, say you've got like a darker snare, your recorded snare is a little bit darker, maybe use like a 57 or something else, where it kind of gives you that more flat or leaning darker sound. And even if you take a bright sample, sometimes you might hear like a separation. You might be missing something because there still needs to be that characteristic that's similar to get them to blend together.
Yeah, snare drums are the love and bane of my existence all at the same time. Like it's like you said, like if when the snare's right, and that doesn't have to be even in the ballpark of the sonics that we've picked in our playlist, like, but when the snare's right for the song almost mixes itself.
Yeah.
And there's just, you know, recording or mixing live, like I've heard some bad snare drums.
One of the things I noticed, when I was trying to pick out some snares that I liked, I feel like at least a lot of the modern engineering that I've been really into in modern rock, modern metal, progressive music. In the mainstream, we still definitely have just the compress the living hell out of the drums and make them smack as hard as they can. You know, whenever you listen to the radio, you know, like Octane or any of that stuff, all those mixes, as great as they are a style, and it takes a lot of work to get songs to sound like that. It's hundreds of tracks. It's crazy. Not my thing. I definitely think, you know, like with anything, you know, you can listen to it on modern country radio or modern hip hop radio. They all sound the same because they're all trying to compete for the same space. You know, they're all trying to be the same thing. But when you break down from that, there's a lot of cool modern mixes where I noticed they're really bringing back a lot of the old school drum sounds, where you're really hearing a lot of the drum, the body of the drum. There's still attack. It's a really cool balance. It's this nice balance of old school where you're hearing this ringiness, this boominess in these drums, because that's what drums sound like live. Doesn't matter how you tune them, but they still have that modern compression and the attack that it's like, wow, they hit.
Well, like, you know, was it 5 years or so ago is like when the 80s production started getting really cool coming back? I hope we cycle back to 90s style where, like,
dude, right?
You get the attack from the top mic, but then like some of the body from the snare just comes from like a good reverb.
Oh, dude,
like,
I mean, Alice in Chains, I could talk about them forever.
That was my
Alice in Chains reverb. I mean, if you go, I think in Slate's Verb Suite Classics, there is a preset called Alice Verb, and it's not the exact same.
It's in the ballpark,
but it's in the ballpark. It's definitely, it's like, oh my god, because their snares on those records are just woo.
Yeah, snare. We could have an entire sub podcast just talking about snares.
How much have you found that you actually get a lot of the crack from your snare out of the reverb, that kind of that crack sound? Obviously it has to be there in the snare drum, but I feel like that kind of explosiveness definitely comes from what reverb you use.
Yeah, most of the drum recordings that I have mixed recently have been myself playing, and it's not, for as much as like I listen to heavy music and everybody pegs me as like a hard rock and metal guy, like most of the stuff that I get called to record for isn't really that heavy.
No, yeah, it's not.
I feel like my playing style is very different from what I listen to, which I do like, I guess, the dichotomy of that. But for live, I love clipping a snare into a reverb. Like that's even like mixing stuff in studio. Clipping the snare into a verb is just one of my favorite sounds. And
What is it? What's happening? What kind of sound are you creating?
it's just some sort of like overdriven, harmonically enhanced version of the snare drum. It gives it a little bit more grit, and I feel like because
is there a little more of that energy, that more explosive energy because you're clipping it?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily clipping it on the track and then sending the clip snare to the. I'm in this mix phase now where there's another side tangent where like if I'm sending the dry track to an effect, I like it to be slightly different than just sending the output of my like example for vocals. It would be easier to explain this way. You know, when you're mixing vocals, you're gonna do your like, you know, you're gonna EQ it and then you're gonna put on like an 1176 in the 2A and get that real compressed like in your face thing. But when I send to my vocal effects, I will duplicate the channel probably of whatever I'm sending. So if it's a vocal verb, and I won't compress it as much.
Okay.
I'll leave it like 1.5 to 2.
And what we do, will you send that?
1, and I'll send that to my effects.
Will you send that pre-fader?
It depends.
So that you're not really having like a doubling effect going on. You're not really using that
No.
dry. You're just using it wet.
I won't have that going to the master bus. Like the output of that will just go to an effects.
Okay,
bus,
I got you.
And all of my effects will be triggered by that vocal thing.
So it doesn't even matter for your post.
No, it's not.
It's not a send. You're literally just routing that to the verb.
Yeah, I mean, you could use the send if you want, but why? Yeah,
it makes sense what you're doing though.
I don't know for vocals especially because like mic if the mic technique is good because like I told Nick to try to do this, and from our live gigs, I can see that he's taken it to heart a little bit more. But Dustin of Thrice has really great mic technique where, like, if he needs there to be a part that's more reverby, he'll get up and he'll yell, and then he'll come back. Or if it needs to be like super ambient, he'll sing louder but further away from the mic.
Yeah.
So it's still triggering the reverb, and I just feel like it gives it, just a slightly different color.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of guys don't fully understand mic technique.
So when I'm sending to a snare reverb, which we'll cover in more detail later, I like to overdrive it a little bit because I just feel that it gives it this separation, but it also glues it together at the same time, where it doesn't sound like just a totally washed out reverby snare drum. It has, I don't know, just another characteristic to the song.
Do you do any pre-delay on your reverb there so that you're hitting that direct signal first and then the reverb, or with that sender you just no pre-delay because that's essentially your reverb sound with that dry snare?
No, I'm usually pre-delaying a reverb, and it just depends on.
Yeah, it depends on the song, but
yeah, faster songs a really short pre-delay.
Mm-hmm.
I found that for whatever reason, I like numbers that end in 7 for my pre-delay. So either 7, 17, 27, or 37. No idea why. It's just the way that
vibes.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I do a similar thing.
Like a 37 millisecond pre-delay on a vocal delay, especially live, is just.
I do 5s.
Or vocal reverb. If it's a slower jam, if it's quicker, it's obviously.
I like 5s for my delays. They'll be like
that's fair.
35 milliseconds, 55 milliseconds, 75.
Yeah, I don't know why the 7s work, but it just.
Yeah. Hey.
There's something for the way I approach it that I always feel that it just locks it in.
Yeah. All right, so let's start off with just the snare itself. So, not that we haven't already started, but let's rewind here. The snare itself. So talk to me. Obviously, so let me as not a drummer. Right. We're gonna phrase this as if I'm interviewing you. All right, when you're picking out a snare drum, what are you looking for? So like if we're gonna go, I think a lot of the people that are gonna listen to us kind of listen to. We'll just call it rock music. We won't go to the extremes of metal. Right. We'll just call it rock music. I think Foo Fighters are kind of there in the middle where they're not heavy, they're not. But so, how do you go picking the material for the snare? Wood snare, metal snare. There's all kinds of different ones. What do you get from those different materials?
Brief synopsis, and I said this in the kick drum episode, but it's true for all types of wood. Maple is your middle ground. Like, it's got a little bit of low end. Maybe there's just a tiny scoop in the mids naturally and some nice high end, but it's just a good, it is your SM57 of woods. It is just, you can tune it to get the attack or you can tune it to get the warmth. If you can only get one drum set, or one snare, and you need it to do your blues gig, your metal gig, whatever, maple is your friend.
It's most versatile. You can kind of get a lot out of it.
There's nothing it can't do, really. Birch is, a little more attacky because it's a harder wood.
Okay.
Maybe has less mids. No, sorry. Birch would probably have extended lows, a mid bump, and a high bump. So it's basically just imagine a more harmonically rich maple, if that makes sense. It's maple on steroids, but maybe has, it's
And for our next video, we are going to buy anabolic steroids and inject them into snare drums and see what happens.
Yeah, it's just it's a souped up maple. It's a harder wood. It's got more punch. It's got more attack, but it's still pretty versatile.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not, it's not your smooth jazz cocktail kit wood of choice.
Because it's got a little more of that.
Yeah, if you're going, pop, a dense pop mix, or rock, or even, some of the modern country stuff where you just need it to cut, birch is your friend. Mahogany is one of my favorites. It's a little warmer. The high end is a little more subdued. It's got, a pretty big bump in the low mids, so it's warm, but not in the boxiness, kind of below that.
Okay.
And then it's got a pretty big boost in the low end.
I really feel like I never really get a lot of boxiness out of snares. I feel like that's really a more of a kick drum tom thing.
It's a tuning thing too, yeah.
I feel like I rarely ever run into that whole 400 to 600 hertz kind of boxy thing.
Yeah, so those are your wood drums. Obviously, there's Babinga and oak and all that stuff too. Look it up. Babinga's got, just that body and that heft. A lot of low end.
And it sounds cool.
Yeah, it's fun to say. So then you got your metal drums. Steel cuts the most.
I really like steel drums. I really, really like steel snares.
Slipknot. You know, that kind of ringy cut. Mm-hmm. I like aluminum or aluminium, as our British friends say. It's kind of similar to steel, but it's drier, so it doesn't have as much of a ring. Think the Ludwig acrylites are aluminum, so I think Bonham used an aluminum one.
I feel like that's one of the things that I think that's the ringiness. The ringiness of snares is something that used to be, you brought up Bonham. A lot of those old 60s, 70s, there's a lot of ringiness in the snares.
Yeah, they were either super ringy or super dead.
The 80s came around, and with,
you get the fireworks reverb on the drum.
Yeah, and then the 80s came around, then it was we went to this really muted, dead snare sound.
Fat with a lot of white noise.
Yeah. And then the 90s was still kind of not so much, but it brought a little bit of life back to it, but it was still just mostly crack,
Yeah.
And not the drug. That was the 80s still.
I like a cracky snare.
And I feel like up until recently, again, like I said, the whole attack thing, there was no ringiness to drums, whereas I find a lot of these recordings that I like in the more denser mixes. You might not necessarily notice the ringiness, but if you are able to dissect it, and if you have a chance, I've found, at least through some of the stems and files I've got, I was like, oh wow, it's a really ringy snare, and it helps to cut through a mix so that you might not notice it in the mix that it's ringy, but that ringiness, that extra harmonic content is helping the rest of it cut through. And I think it's really important to realize the things that you're not necessarily hearing, but that are allowing you to hear more detail.
I learned doing this playlist that in the mix, I like ringier snares than I do when I'm sitting behind a drum kit.
Yeah.
It's strange. Your brass and your bronze are similar to steel, but they got more of a body and more of a punch to them. Nevermind by Nirvana was done on a Tama Bell brass.
Okay.
Danny Carey of Tool uses a bronze snare drum these days. Those are the creme de la creme of fucking snare drums.
We should do a part 2 of this and bring Andy in.
Yeah.
Have him talk about snares because he's got a collection.
Yeah, I need to expand my snare collection.
I'd love to see you two argue about snares.
I feel like Andy's the kind of guy I wouldn't argue about snares with. I feel like,
wouldn't argue.
Yeah,
He would just tell you that you're wrong. He'd
that's
just be
fair.
Like,
Yeah,
Tama.
Yeah.
But all right. How about snare sizes?
Yeah, big misconception in the snare size game.
Size misconceptions. Yeah, I think we all know about that.
Hey.
Hello, all my exes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole episode could be filled with puns. I mean, we're talking about wood
so
sizes.
bad. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome, everybody, that we're not doing that. We could easily fall into that, but we're not. We're better than that. We are.
Yeah, we're waiting till episode 4/3 to go to the gutter.
Yeah, exactly. Subsection D. Ha. Wink.
D for drum. Yeah,
D
I get
for
it.
drum, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you just gotta bang it out sometimes.
6 inch. 6 inch.
6 inch
drums.
snare drum.
So,
Yeah.
Actually, I'd love to hear that. That'd probably sound really cool.
Yeah, I mean, 6 is probably your middle ground for depth as
It's your
far as
average
snare
size,
drums
right?
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
your average depth.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, there's too much variation as far as like material and sizes to like cover it in one podcast
Yeah.
episode.
But just in general, are smaller in what? Smaller diameter? Is that they measured in diameter or circumference?
Diameter.
Diameter is
Yeah.
smaller diameter more likely to give you a higher pitch sound.
Yeah, I mean,
A bigger diameter, more lower.
low,
Same
yeah,
thing with
like
a
toms,
deeper
yeah.
drummer. A deeper drum is going to give you a lower sound versus a more shallow drum.
not necessarily true.
Not necessarily true.
Yeah, that's a misconception that's in the show notes. So like the real fat, like dead, like 80s sound
Mhm.
is that everyone will buy like 8-inch deep snare drums,
Mhm.
and then they'll wonder why they can't get the punch out of the low tune snare.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, it's just physics, because in order for the snare to make the sound, the wires have to rattle.
Yeah.
So if you have it tuned soupy low, and you hit it, it's got to go. There's no tension. So however the physics actually work, it's just going to take longer for the sound pressure to travel down the drum.
Because they're lower frequency waves, and they take
Yeah.
longer to form.
And it's got a further. So if you want the really fat snare, get a 5.5 or a 5 and just finger tight that thing.
Now, is a 5.5 or 5? Where in relation is that? Like your average size depth, or is that more of a shallow depth?
5, I would say 5 to 6.5 is kind of your standard,
like the
your
standard.
standard depth. So you
Okay.
got 5, 5.5, 6, and 6.5. All of those are pretty neutral sounding. Anything shorter than that, then you're getting into like your piccolo drum
Okay.
territory. I don't really dig really shallow snares.
Ooh, then you're not gonna like my first snare on the list. Actually,
There's some that
actually no, you are. I know you like this.
there
snare.
are some that are cool, but
Yeah.
for the most, if I had my druthers, I would pick I don't know.
It wouldn't be your snare that you'd be like, hey, you could probably use this in a lot of different different scenarios.
especially for home recording and versatility
You
aspect.
generally want a pretty flat in the middle snare because then you have a little more room to maneuver.
Yeah, get a 5.5, or I would recommend a 14x6 of whatever
Yeah.
your preferred choice is. Obviously, the drummer is going to have theirs, but it's good to just have a good middle of the road snare to cover all of your bases. Like if you only had to pick one.
You're gonna
Whereas,
cover my bass in a snare.
Yeah, the weird, the more specific depths, you almost get to the point where it's kind of one trick pony. I think
So
that
if you have the collection, if you have the ability, if your drummer does come in and he's like, hey man, I got all these different snares.
yeah, test them all out.
Yeah, test them all out. Exactly.
Yeah, so I think a lot of something that happens is drummers will typically tune their drums too high, their snares too high,
Okay.
because it feels good to have the tension and the rebound. So that's when, maybe you do consider a deeper snare if you want it tuned slightly higher. That's something I like.
I don't know if I sent you those files for that album that I'm working on. And I don't know if you noticed, but you played drums on one of them.
I did, yes. I was like, oh, I think that's my drum take.
Yeah. Dude, those drums, I remember we tracked those here. We tracked those in the next room over. I was blown away. I mean, that was almost 3 years ago that we tracked those.
Yeah.
And dude, that snare sounds amazing. Like I didn't use any samples.
Yep, that's
on that session that I sent you. That whole record, there are no samples on it. I'm pretty proud of. But dude, your snare drum on that sounds amazing.
it's a 14 by 6-inch mahogany poplar Gretsch snare. I actually just fixed that snare up.
So
the other week.
based on, obviously it's mixed, and so I did a lot of EQing.
Right.
But how was that tuned? Just for my knowledge, was that a lower tuning? Was that kind of just in the middle? Was that high tuned?
Well, it was a higher tuned snare, but I had a really thick head on it, so
Okay.
it lowers the pitch
Okay,
as
because
well.
I thought it was. I love that.
It's one of those the Evans Kevlar heads.
Oh, okay.
So you could. The thing I like about it is you could really crank it up,
Mm-hmm.
and it still gives you a really low note because Kevlar is fucking thick. So it's great for
Okay,
like
nice.
heavy rim shot based rock stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because that thing cracked. That thing
Yeah.
was like pow pow. It was
Another
awesome.
big thing is just the amount of wires on the bottom of the drum too. I find that drums stock usually come with like 16 or 20,
Mm-hmm.
and for what I like in a snare, it's just not enough.
Okay.
Because it makes the snare sound too drummy.
Oh, I
You know what I mean? Whereas like
Yeah.
I'll put, depending, they don't make them for 13s because my favorite snare that in my rotation is a 13 by 6.5. We'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
So that has 30 snare wires on the bottom.
Okay.
Whereas my 14s, I like to have, they have one that has 40 or 42.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, to me, the snare should sound like a snare.
Oh
So-
no, I agree. I feel like a lot of times you can kind of get away with the toms and the kick drum being a little similar, just different pitches in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna sound different because you've got a beater versus a drumstick hitting those. But the snare, I feel like if your snare sounds too similar to other drums, I always have a problem with
Yeah.
that. It doesn't matter how good that snare ends up sounding. If then when I start hearing the other drums and I can't really tell the difference, I get really like bummed
Yeah,
out.
if the snare wires aren't balanced or if they're choked out or if there's just not enough, the snare almost sounds like it's just like you hit it and it just goes doink, doink,
We should
doink.
Marzi's getting ready to. We're finishing up some writing sessions, and we're going to be recording some singles. We should do a video shoot and have you come in and work with Andy on.
Yeah.
We'll do a day of. We'll do some filming of the whole thing.
Drum
We'll
nerd stuff.
yeah, but we can use the Marzi recording sessions. We can shoot some videos and
Yeah.
kind of use those to break down some cool stuff with guitar
Yeah.
tone, bass tone, and then these drum things, and really go through a whole like, hey, we're gonna show you how to change drum heads. Like we'll show you. This is Adam's approach to why he's choosing this. This is what we can go from the perspective of like, hey, me and Andy are looking for this sound, and then we'll use you as the guide, the teacher.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Anyone out there, because we're not going to have time to just talk about it. Oh, because I'm choking on coffee grounds. Not going to have time to talk about it all today. Look up Kenny Sherritt's on YouTube. Like, he's a drum tech wizard. If you need to learn how to tune a drum, he's got your back. He has so many series on like, here's how you tune a 13 by 7 maple snare, or here's how you tune a 14 by 6.5 Ludwig acrylite. Like, dude just knows drums.
Yeah, that's
It'll
awesome.
be, I don't want to just rehash and steal his content. Like, that's his
Oh,
bread
yeah.
and butter. He's he's been good to me when we've talked. Like, check him out. Like,
Who does he tech for?
everybody and anybody.
Everybody and everybody. I love
He
that band.
was with, he was on tour with Elvis Costello when I met him.
Ooh.
He just did the Dead and Company tour. He was with Stevie Wonder back in the day for a while. He was with Train for a while back in the day.
Hey, soul sister.
Yeah,
How you doing?
I'm pretty sure Kenny said that tour bought me a house. You ever heard of a drummer who bought a house?
You ever heard of a drummer?
Yeah, his resume is impressive.
Awesome. So definitely check him out, people.
I will link to his channel in our YouTube description and our playlist. The info of wherever you get your pods, I'll drop a link.
You get the pods.
Shout out Kenny Sherritt's. Love you.
All right. So how about throwing my pen everywhere? Should we get to microphones now? Should we talk about miking a snare?
Well, let's talk about some treatment. That's next on damping and muffling.
Ooh, okay,
if you're,
cool.
Your snare is too ringy. There's a couple ways. Moon gel is a classic. I like to cut them in half or
They
quarters.
get so gross after a while, though.
Yeah, I don't really
They
use
start
them
to
anymore.
like leak. Oh God! I touched a snare drum one time that
Yeah.
I had some on there. I was like, and the moon gel had like completely disintegrated off of it, so
You
it
leave
just
it
left
out in
a
the
sticky
heat,
substance.
so
And
it's
I
just-
was,
And it looks
I was
like
a little freaked
blue Jello.
Oh, it was real gross. Yeah.
I mean, use them. They make clear ones, which is, I guess, a slight improvement because then there's not blue like residue squares on your drums. You can make a gaff tape tent.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
is my go-to. So you
I've
take
gaffed a lot of snares and toms.
a 4 or 6 inch strip of gaff tape, and you either if it's flat for the video viewers, you just kind of fold it in on itself so it sticks together, and then you leave 2 little fins on the side, and you just
you almost create like a little tag that you can grab onto.
Yeah, and that's easier, so you don't have to like when you peel it off of your drums. I'll do a double tent on one side, and then a single on like completely opposite of the drum.
I used actually a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember what the actual brand of it was, but it was one of those like thin plasticky pads almost. I don't remember what it was. I think it was called like a Big Shot.
Big fat snare drum.
Yeah. That blew my mind. I thought like when I saw that I was like, that's gimmicky as hell. Like, but
no, they're great.
The snare, it was crazy. Like we had it on at first, and I was like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. That snare drum sounds amazing. And I asked the guy, I was like, hey Dave, I was like, let's just take it off real quick and let's see what it sounds like. It completely changed the tone of that snare drum. And it sounded like a different snare drum. I was blown away by how just putting that on there.
Yeah, and those are great because you can tune the snare up to the tension point that feels good to the rebound of your drumstick hitting the drum head. But then it also makes it, kind of fatter.
So I definitely recommend those because I think it's really
like $20.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have some of those little. They might seem like gimmicky devices, but if it saves you time in the studio because a lot of bands don't have the budget. They might not have the budget to sit there and you take 5 hours to really experiment with the drums. And sometimes you get guys that are just like, no, I refuse to change. I don't want to tune my drum or I don't have fresh heads. And it's like, if you've got these things like, hey, let me just put this on your drum real quick. Most guys, they're like, okay, whatever. Yeah. Like it's weird how they can be, but just throwing something like that on there, it's awesome.
You can hack that too. It won't give you the same effect, but take an old drum head and just X-Acto knife it out from the aluminum ring, or even if it's the same size, just turn one upside down. You can put a piece of paper on a snare drum.
Basically, that's kind of the same scientific principle as like your Kevlar head, where you're just creating a thicker head, basically, by putting that on there.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I guess it would be similar to the big fat snare drums, which I need to get one of those. I have some old drum heads that I've like cut a circle out of the middle of, or cut like a triangle. Or...
One of my favorite sounds is you take a glass plate and you put it on the snare drum. That first shot, it only works once time, but that sound, you get a real nice crack out of it.
I mean, even with Nick, you've seen, I'll do a bandana, and
I love that.
I'll just binder clip it to the side, and it just kind of like, you lay it on there gently, and when you hit it, it'll kind of jump up, and then just...
Yeah, I've learned, just by watching you and performing with you, I've taken to mind and heart like some really interesting ideas of just putting different things on, different material on top of the snare. Completely changes the sound of it. It's incredible.
You can go to the dollar store and get a bandana for $1, and then you can get a pack of binder clips also for $1. So for $2, you have a deader, fatter snare.
I did in the same drum recording recently. Fortunately, and this isn't going to work for a lot more busy or technical stuff. Now it can if you are inclined to break down the parts and do different sections. And so for the chorus of this song, it's very much, it was just washing the rhyme. It was just a
yep.
So just
typical
very
rock
simple beat. And so in his left hand, I had him use a thicker drumstick because we wanted that more light kind of
airy
feel
sound,
for the cymbal. And then, but then we used a thick drumstick for that snare, and we had him do rim shot, and it was just, oh my god, it was a cannon. And so then we broke it down to the parts because in the other part of the song, he is using the toms, and so then we did the regular drumsticks. But then that itself created a dynamic lift in the song where you're still using the same tuning, the same drum, so you don't have that weird thing that can happen if you all of a sudden change the tuning of the drum or something like that. It's just thicker stick. So it was really cool. So
you could go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get adhesive backed like weather stripping, and you just kind of tear it off, like the stuff you put around like windows or your doors or whatever. Just tear it off and stick it on there, and at the end of the day, just rip it off. It muffles the drum head. Don't use duct tape.
Yeah,
just don't.
Don't unless you're already gonna throw that head away at the end of the day.
Yeah, still don't. No duct tape.
It's gross.
I mean, hell, the tried and true. Just put your wallet on the snare if you need it dead a little bit. It sounds ridiculous. Oh,
How does it not just bounce around everywhere?
Because I'm carrying stacks, bro.
All that Patreon money that you guys are supposed to give to us. Subscribe. Patreon.com/
Reflections Artist Collective.
What an advert.
Make them snares as fat as my wallet, or wallet as fat as my
We
snares.
want to make enough money that we can fill a 20-inch deep snare drum.
I mean, you're not putting money in the drum. You're just putting the wallet on the drum.
We could. If you guys want to see that, donate. Help us out.
Yeah, no, it works. It sounds ridiculous, but just throw a wallet on there. It'll choke it out just enough.
All right, we're totally going to shoot that on video. So when we do this recording session, we'll be like, all right, guys, for this, we need a real thick snare stand. Here we go. Grab your wallet. Who's got the fattest wallet?
Yeah, what others? Sheet of paper. You could roll up some paper towels or toilet paper in the gaff tape.
I've actually done the paper trick, and it does create, because it does rip the paper. But and so, like, all joking aside about that, but there is this sound that comes. It's not going to last long. So you don't rip the paper. But if you've ever taken like a sheet of paper and you kind of snap it, you know, and it does that little pop sound.
Yeah, it does.
You can kind of pick that up a little bit in snare recordings. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, put some small tambourines or something on it, or jingly jang, like.
Yeah, just jingly janglies, man. Just whip out your jingly janglies.
Whatever. You're allowed to be creative in the just because you're not in a big fancy studio doesn't mean you can't do like cool stuff.
And I feel like that's the key thing. I feel
Put
like
a splash cymbal on the snare drum.
I feel like we've done a lot more creative stuff because we're not in a big recording studio. I got into a conversation with a guy. I think it was like right before the pandemic. He had moved into a space at the rehearsal building that I was using for a group. And I got to talking with him. He's like, oh, an engineer. He's like, I used to be out in L.A., and, he pretty much right out of engineering school got this internship at this studio. And it's a pretty big, it's a really nice big studio in L.A. And so I was chit-chatting with him, and I was bringing up ideas. I was talking to him about some of the approaches that I have, and he was just like, yeah, man, I just, I hate being in this room that I have. He's like, because you just can't get any good sounds. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, and he was very, I'm going to say it nicely, but he was very, stuck up and obnoxious, because it's just like he had never gone through that process that a lot of us go through of having to do home recording, of having to be like, hey, I'm going to show up to your band's rehearsal space and record you. That's the only way we can do it, because my mom won't let me record in the basement today, or something. Everybody's gone through that, but this guy hadn't. And as awesome of an opportunity that must have been for him to work in that studio, it's like now he's a little bit jaded and he just doesn't realize that it's like, well, dude, like, of course you can get a great sound by putting your vocals through an actual LA2A. Like, that's, that's awesome. Of
There's
course
no way it's not awesome.
Yeah, I mean, even if you smash the hell out of it.
But I'm not spending $3,000 on one compressor.
Yeah.
Like,
I can't. But and so the same thing with the snare drum. It's just like, I mean, if you're in a studio where you've got a collection of 50 or, maybe not 50, but 15 like $1,000 snare drums, you're like, these are the greatest of all time. Like, yeah, go for it. But if you don't have that, figure it out. There's so many things you can do. Just experiment. Take a little bit of
the resonant head of the snare is very important to the tuning.
Now, for people who don't know, the resonant head is the
bottom head that the snare wires are rested on. Just look again. I'll plug him. Look up Kenny Sherritt's. He on his YouTube channel. He will show you how to balance snare wires. You kind of want them in the center of the drum and not pulling one way or the other, so then they're not like cocked to one side or whatever. I'm not going to give specific tuning intervals because there's too much variables in snare drums and tone.
To start off with, I would just say, just tune it till it sounds good. And when it sounds good in the mic, because I think that's the other thing you got to remember too, is that
like it won't, if you know the key of the song, tune the snare to whatever the keys of the song is in. High or low. If you're playing in the key of G, tune your snare to a G. If you're playing in the key of D, tune it to a D. That could be a higher register D, a middle D, or a low D.
Yeah, you got a couple octaves you can work with there.
But that's kind of my fail-safe go-to, is having the snare. And you don't have to memorize it. I don't really know the keys because I'm not, I don't really play anything that melodic. But I have the circle of fifths on my phone, and I have a tune bot, and I have on my notebook what note is in each key and where I like drums. And then I have in a note app, I just have the intervals of each drum or each, we'll get to it in the tom episode, but there are tuning intervals in toms that are tried and true. So I'll just have the intervals of each key and like what drum works for what note and then the interval of that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That'll be fun to get into.
Mm.
Now we're
So-
going to move on to microphones. Should we do microphones now?
Yeah, I think that rambling kind of covered enough. I would love to be more specific, but there's just so
There's a
much.
lot.
There's
There's a
just-
lot, but I think it's just mainly important that it's, it all
The-
starts off
yeah.
with, the type of snare drum you're using, the head. The head is so important. Also, I really like, if you're going for an explosive, cracky snare drum, you need a fresh head. If you're going for a more, I'll call it this more electronic snare drum sound, that 80s sound, you need maybe a deader head, something that's not going to ring out as much.
Mhm.
Use whatever materials you can, to help adjust your snare sound if you're not getting it with whatever drum you have. Those are all the most important things. And then here we go with the microphones. You only need a 57. You only ever need a 57.
Yeah, and I'm a
there-
notorious 57 on snare, not a fan, but
It's not like amazing. It's not the greatest thing ever, but if you use a 57 on the snare, you can do a lot. I think there are other. We'll get ready to talk
I
about
will
some
say
other
this because I
options.
made a note.
Mhm.
If a drummer brings in a snare drum that no longer has coating, don't even try it. Like unless you're going for like an avant-garde jazzy kind of thing.
Be like, bro, you got to put a fresh head on there.
dude, no. Like
Yeah.
I will give you $20 and you yourself are going to the music store.
This is gonna save me hours and hours and
Yeah.
hours of mixing time.
Like
Yeah.
because we've had that happen before.
Oh yeah. It's,
I've had it happen working on an album in a legit studio situation.
Yeah.
I looked at the guy and I think I just said, bro.
that's bro.
No.
Always.
That guy
yeah,
had some problems.
I definitely. Whenever you're working with a client, when you first start working, of course, always have a conversation with
If you
them
can
prior.
only afford one drum head, put it on a snare.
Yeah. Include these kind of things in their budget. Not that you're going to pay for it and they're going to pay you back, but just let them know, like, hey, here's what it's going to cost to hire me. Here are these things that, like,
I
need
need
you to
this.
do. I need you to do these things. So, plan for, you need to have new strings on your guitar when you come in. You need
Yes.
to have new bass strings. You need to have, fresh drum heads. Here are some heads that I recommend.
Yeah.
Kind of,
you
as
can-
an
yeah, and
engineer,
if you
learn
can-
those things,
Like I said, if you can only afford one new drum head, the snare head, like, that's the most important.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff for guitar that we'll talk about
Yeah.
in that aspect of like certain strings and gauges, what type of bridge on your guitar, and so
There's so many snare heads out there. Do your research. I'm sure we'll do an episode on it down the line.
I mean, heck, if you're at a point where you can afford to stock up on some of these things, that then maybe you put into the budget for the band. That the band then when you're making when you're outlining the cost of things, saying, hey,
I have drum heads.
I have drum heads here that I like to use. They cost this much. I'm going to put that into my charges here, so that they don't have to worry about going out and buying them. It's just, but they know up front that hey, like that's a cost there, $30, whatever it might be.
Buy, if
Have strings, have those kind of things. I think
Don't-
that could be a selling point for you. A lot of bands might, at first, I think a lot of times bands might be hesitant, but when they hear the results, they will go, oh my God. And then when they talk about you as like, yeah, he's got drum heads and strings that like, we paid for him, but like he's
They're
already got
on
them
hand,
there
yeah.
and they're on hand and it's really cool. And we just do it right then and there. Yeah. It takes a lot of that responsibility off the band themselves because they just want to play their music. Most bands don't understand really anything about the recording process. They just think you're sticking up mics and they don't think about all these little things. So as much as you can provide and do for them beforehand, they're going to look at you and be like, this guy's a god.
Yeah, like if you have, okay, I'm going to interview, I have a question for you now.
Ooh.
If you were budgeting to buy a snare for your home recording studio, give me your budget range. I'm going to spend from X to Y. And we'll exclude used, like out of the box, I'm going to spend
How much would I spend? What would I would
reasonably. Like,
reasonably?
obviously, if I could afford the $3,000 VK cast bronze snare, I'm
so
buying
with
it.
where I'm at right now, so it's, I think coming from a place of not being a total beginner, but not being a seasoned veteran,
Right.
I also don't really know how much drums cost, so
Just
I'm gonna
throw out
it
a number.
I would say probably between $500 and $800 is what I
That's
would go
fair.
for a snare that's gonna be my battle snare, if
Right.
you will. That's gonna be like, I could use this on every record.
Right.
And find one that I really like. I'd say $500 to $800.
And I would say spend, if you can afford an $800 snare, you might be able to find on the used market that snare for like $400.
Yeah.
But spend your lower amount of money, like hit low on that price range. Like I'm going to spend $500 and then just spend $150 on different snare drum heads.
Yeah.
And you can charge your clients, but then you have the options, The snare sounds good, but if it's got this single ply Remo, I'm not super familiar with Remo. I don't know why I
do
threw
like
them
Remo
out.
heads. I think we used their no, it's not Imperial, Power something on our recent recording.
Reverse. No, that's the Evans one. Power Center.
It was something Emperor. We used something Emperor, and it's like real thick sounding.
Okay, so I like Evans. I've never had a problem with them. That's just I'm brand loyal to Evans.
They sound great. I love Evans heads.
So if you're like, I bought this snare and it's got the Evans G2 on it, but it's too ringy. We're like, well, I spent the $15 and now I have an Evans ST Dry, which has the little portholes around the side. So it's just gonna eliminate some of that ring. Like that's gonna get you further than being like, I need to spend $500 to $800 on another snare that's slightly less ringy.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely think changing the drum heads, changing the sticks, changing just the way that having the drummer hit it differently, you're going to get so much more than just buying another snare drum.
Yeah. So, don't max out your budget on one snare drum. Like buy something, make sure it's good. Like it has to be above a certain standard.
Yeah, don't spend $50 on a cheap no name DW Toys R Us brands. Or do and make it sound awesome.
Yeah,
and
make
then get
it unique.
Back to us.
I almost, I like going to antique shops because sometimes you'll find a deal, and there's sometimes I regret not buying the super beat up snare drum because it was just fat. Mm-hmm. But it was like right towards the end of COVID where it was just like I have money, but I don't know the next time I'm gonna make money, so I'm not gonna spend this, and I'm just like I should drive back and see if they have it.
I'm down.
But yeah, it's a very having extra snare heads on hand is a very cost-effective way to alter the sound of the snare because it is arguably the most important drum.
Yeah, I agree.
Tonally, because there's so many options.
Tonally, bro.
So now we can talk about microphones.
Yeah, I honestly, my thing I've been doing recently is the 57. I watch so many videos and I see so many. Do a lot of the. I don't know if I can name them. Nail the Mix. We'll bleep that out if we have to. But
I don't think we have to.
They'll talk about that on when they break it down. They're like, oh yeah, I used a 57. Like so many times. Granted, within that genre, there's a heavy sampling involved.
Yeah. So it's
my method of approach for most rock and heavier is I really try to go for the direct snare sound is the drummer's snare, and all I'll use is maybe a room sample.
Right. Yeah.
I prefer that because again, the snare is it gives so much personality to the drum kit. Whereas a lot of other things I think can kind of sound similar, but the snare, it's like that's so much of the personality. And then, like you said, the cymbals. So I think the 57 just gives you a really nice flat place to maneuver from. But recently, I've been doing the whole SM57 small diaphragm condenser. I've been using the Warm Audio 84, the KM184 clone. I gotta get one of those clips. I ordered one of those clips where like you only have to use one clip and it clips them together and it puts the diaphragms like perfectly in phase. But I love that combo. That's been really cool. There's something about the Warm Audio where it almost sounds like it's compressing itself a little bit. I don't know what's going on, but it has just this very, very crisp attack to it that adds a lot more life. The 57 is just very flat.
Yeah.
It's dull, but you can do a lot with it. Whereas the small diaphragm condenser adds that life, that excitement to it. I think that you can blend in. How about you? I know you're not a fan of this 57, so what are some other options?
I probably rag on Shure more than I should, but like,
Considering you're talking into one right now.
Yeah, I just think I use the 57 so much, like, all the time live that...
I mean, it's the go-to live mic.
Most people would think, like, you just know how to work it, but it's just, like, it's boring,
Mm-hmm. No, it is boring, but...
To me, at least, because I have to use it all the time. There's also this weird, like... it's the same sound podcast that I mentioned that we stole this, like, going down the input list thing from, and it was one of the hosts of Live Sound Bootcamp said, like, pretty much all professional microphones sound good directionally talking into it, but what makes the difference between a good pro microphone and a great pro microphone is what the off-axis spill or bleed going into the microphone sounds like. And I feel like with the Shores, there's just so much 1K, like in the not directional sound of it that like, we're not recording the guys with like the best finesse behind the drum kit, Andy excluded. And I'm not knocking these, the players that we're recording, but they're just, they're not recording themselves all the time, so they don't
know.
Yeah.
They just don't know. They're
I'm not
not they're not hearing themselves in that context ever.
Yeah, and I'm not going to fault anybody for not knowing something that they're unaware of.
So that's our job as producers and engineers, is to inform them of this stuff, to be like, hey, this is happening. We need you to do this.
And there's a lot of good, useful information in a snare in like the 1K area. But if you're not recording the most balanced player, the 57, I feel you have to EQ some of that 1K out, because like you're just getting this like telephonic hi-hat sound in there.
Yeah, we definitely need to talk about that before we end. Is with snare drums comes hi-hat, and that's so
going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, note made. Let's talk about that after this. But
so a tighter polar pattern snare drum not snare drum. A tighter polar pattern mic on your snare drum will be your friend. I recently bought the Beyer Dynamic M201, and I may never use another snare mic again.
I haven't used that yet. I'm gonna.
Some people feel it's a little dark, but I like that because, like I said, with kick drums, I would rather EQ in attack and brightness than have to EQ out attack and brightness. It captures the puff of the snare drum really well, like almost not in like an annoying, like plosively like way, but like, you hear a snare drum close and there's some air that moves off the top head.
Yeah.
And I feel like this captures it in it when you hear it, but you can't explain it. Like there's just, I feel like it records the air coming off of the snare drum really well. It's a little pricey. I think they usually go for $300 or so, which is out of the range for most people. I said I had a bad day, and I was like, I'm buying this because I deserve it.
That sounds like a bad habit starting to form, but I love it, and I'm going to encourage it.
Oh, believe me, you should see.
Phoenix, I'm feeling really bad today, so I bought us another camera.
Hey.
I think I just clipped that mic.
That's fine. If you want to get close to the Beyer sound, but you don't have $300, the SE Electronics V7X is their instrument version of the V7. This is
that looks like that probably has a wider diaphragm
than a 57.
Than the Beyer.
Yeah, they're one of them's supercardioid and one of them's hypercardioid, and I don't remember which one's which. This one's the tighter. The Beyer has the tighter polar pattern. Super or hyper.
I think it's hyper, isn't it? Look at us.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Everyone's just like, they just lost all credibility. Look at that. That's pretty.
Yeah. It's $10 more than a 57.
Oh, nice.
And I like it probably 10 times more than the 57.
Dude, those SEs, man. We did a lot of cool stuff early on with those.
Yeah, and this is new. We didn't have this back then.
Yeah,
I bought this.
Meant in general, that brand has done some good work for us.
I bought this because I wanted the Beyer sound,
but didn't want to.
And it wasn't.
Didn't want to buy or.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds good. I like the Audix i5. I really don't love it for home recording snare. It is a little too bright.
I love the Audix D6
on a snare. That does sound killer.
It is awesome. Now, honestly, I've done some recordings where I put like 3 or 4 mics on the snare drum if I can fit them, and if I feel confident that the player's not going to destroy all of them.
Yeah.
But
that Heil on a snare is awesome.
Dude, the D6, because it's everyone knows it as like that kick drum microphone for getting that sound. Well, then I thought to myself, I was like, well, I'm missing that from a lot of these snares. So I put that on there, and it's darker. It's got a darker sound, but I think it's balanced out by it's got way more attack on it.
Yeah.
So it's dark, but then you get that attack that kind of, I feel like attack almost kind of tickles your brain, that kind of tricks you into thinking it's not necessarily brighter, but
it's indefinable. You know it when you hear it.
Yeah, that it's like, okay, well, I could tell that tonally this is dark, but I don't feel like it's being lost or in the bottom. It's not in the basement because of the attack that's on it, and it's great. But I would recommend blending it with another microphone, not just using it by itself. But if you're looking for getting that extra bit of attack from it,
Yeah,
blend that with a 57.
that bright, dark kind of thing.
Use your 57 and kind of boost it in the high end area to give you a little bit of that color and character, but then get your punch in that low end oomph from the D6.
Yeah, so typically these days, and it's not the most budget friendly recording setup, but I'll go the Beyer on the top and then the V7 on the bottom, or the 604 on the bottom. If you only have 8 inputs, I would argue that the snare bottom is more important to your mix than a kick out.
100%. No argument.
Yeah, like we talked about in the last episode, you can always duplicate your kick drum, or you can, capture the low end and tuck in a sample that has attack to it. But if you're limited on inputs, get the snare right.
Yeah, the snare bottom is so important.
It's easier to fix a kick drum than it is.
I feel like that's come back in a lot of the videos that I've watched too, as I felt like for quite a few, at least, in hindsight, I haven't been doing this long enough to have been relevant then, but there got to this point where people just stopped using the snare bottom mic because I think because samples became so easily used, just saying, well, screw it, we'll just throw a sample on there. And because it is some weird info there. That's a lot of weird information down there.
Yeah.
It's a weird sound that unless you realize how that's working with how important the snare wires are to it, you can easily throw that away and just be like, oh, I don't need it.
Yeah.
But I think it's become prevalent again that a lot of guys are like, oh no, you totally got to have the snare bottom because you do. That is the sound of the snare. That's it's called the snare for a reason because of those damn wires.
Yeah, they are.
So if you don't have a mic on those, like you're not really recording your snare drum.
Yeah. I like the 421 on a snare. I've
never used that on the snare.
It's a little hard to position. I like it for the reasons that I'm not a fan of the 57.
Okay.
Is that I feel that the off-axis bleed that comes into the 421 is a little more usable, so I don't have to gate it as heavily or do a weird EQ thing and then compensate with another EQ later. It's just kind of a little bit more of a natural thing.
How about large diaphragm condensers on the snare? Have you ever messed with that?
No.
I haven't either. That should be something
Actually,
you should try.
no, that's a lie. I used my Blue Spark on a snare drum once, and I thought I got some pretty cool results. But that was also a thing where I was playing pretty light on the cymbals. I've seen guys use 414s on the snare, and that sounds awesome.
Cool.
I just don't.
I feel like in a very busy drum performance that might not be great. Whereas if you're doing a little more something that's just setting the vibe.
Yeah, if it's a little bit more of an open performance. Yeah. And a lot of it is I get a lot of my snare sound from the overheads.
Yeah.
I almost treat my overheads more as like a distant snare mic that the cymbals are just bleeding into. And then I like to get a lot of my cymbal sounds from my room, but we'll talk about those in a future episode.
That's going to be fun because you and me have very different approaches to cymbals and rooms, I think.
I like snares. There's so much stuff.
How about the hi-hat? How do you battle the hi-hat? I have done that coming back to the what appear to be gimmicky devices that actually are really cool.
Yeah.
I know you and me, we've taken pop filters and then strapped cardboard onto them and foam to block.
It was a mouse pad.
Yeah, we did the mouse pad, trying to block the rejection point even more. I know some companies make actual like devices that you can mount on your microphone stand that will cover your microphone. They typically only work with more of your pencil style microphones.
It's not going to work on a 421 or even.
It might actually. I think about it. They might make some that do.
Maybe.
But,
I've tried the pool noodle trick where you take a pool noodle and you cut it and you put it on the back. You just have to be careful because if you
block too much of it, then you lose.
If you go too far to the capsule, it makes it an omni mic, which is just going to make everything worse.
Mic placement is important, having the hi-hat behind the microphone if it's, cardioid.
Or to the side if it's, which is why I like the Beyer. It just rejects it's so narrow. So with the 201, you just point where the drumstick hits and you'll get a good sound out of it.
But, a lot of it comes, like you said, from the drummer getting proper technique.
The more kind of my starting mic placement is kind of 3 fingers off of the top of the rim of the drum, pointed at the center of the drum. Look at where the most stick marks are on that drummer's drum head, and that'll tell you where they hit.
I think
and point the mic there.
I think
if you need more ring, kind of tilt it down towards the edge of the drum.
I think I always advise, and maybe you might feel differently on this, but I always feel like most drummers don't hit the snare hard enough. Because if you think about it, when you're setting your gain on your preamp, if you're not having to turn that gain up as much, you're less likely to be picking up everything around it. Because if you've got enough dynamic range and difference between that snare drum and everything else, so especially in the context of any type of modern, call it modern pop and then rock and metal,
modern productions,
and I feel like even in other things like, I mean, if you listen to like R&B and other things like that, they're still hitting that snare drum. You're getting pop out of it. I feel like the only thing that you're not really going to hit that snare drum, that you might not want to hit it that way, is maybe in like acoustic folk and maybe jazz. But at that point, too, you're not so much worried about your snare direct mic, because in a lot of those styles, I feel like you're definitely blending a lot more of the room, a lot more of the overhead. But in any style of music where you're trying to go for a lot of the direct mics, got to hit the snare drum harder.
Yeah.
Snare drum harder. If you're looking for lift, rim shots.
Yeah.
Just have drummers think about that. What's the thing you want to focus on the most in the drum mix? Most likely the snare and the kick. So play those a lot harder than everything else,
Yeah, and mic placement too is like you want to place it far enough away that it's not so much proximity effect building up. Which another thing that I really like about the Buyer is it doesn't have a whole lot of proximity effect. And kind of the
if only we would have gotten them to sponsor this video.
Yeah, I know. It's just a love fest.
I think we've talked shit about every other mic, been like, yeah, it's good, but
the
Buyer is just great.
I love the V7X. I genuinely love it. That Heil PR35. If I need an airier, snappier snare drum sound, it's that microphone's great because the rear end rejection's great, so it will reject the hi hat.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's the true sound test right there. If you have everybody ever looking, scratch test and snap test.
It's just a matter of it's my favorite snare mic. Like we talked about it, I think in the first not kick drum episode, but the first podcast back episode. Like every live performance or every record where I'm just like, the fucking snare. Like regardless of tuning or size of drum or drum head or player, it's that mic.
I'm going to see. I think I have a drum session this Sunday, since we're going to be secretly. We're going to be getting together possibly whatever day.
Friday,
Friday,
I think,
yeah. I might ask to borrow that over the weekend so I could test that out.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, sorry, guys, we got to re-record all the drums for the entire record now because of that snare mic.
Yeah.
No, I actually have got some good snare tunes recently, but I definitely want to try that out.
Yeah, the V7X, I would call it the working man's 201.
I also...
If I don't know the drummer, I'm not taking this out live.
Oh, no, I wouldn't. I think live, just use your 50s R.
Yeah, I got... Because Gettysburg Rocks isn't happening, but there's like a stand-in fest that's happening that weekend. I think on my stage, I'm going to bring the V7X, and that's probably going to be my snare mic. I like options, and I'm now at the point where I can afford to buy more microphones. I have a microphone, addiction. I love microphones.
Yeah. No, they're incredible. I think microphones are they're the most important thing. Before you go buying preamps, before you go buying...
fancy pants, plugins.
I think there could be a balance, because I think the other thing is too, you got to make sure you're still having fun.
It's all symbiotic, it all works together.
If getting that preamp or getting whatever that might be or that new plugin is gonna inspire you more,
do it.
Yeah, I would argue go with that. But just realize that if you're chasing a certain sound, microphones, it's the chain. What input chain? I don't know what I call it. The source. It always starts at the source. Just go down the input chain. God damn it, I can't think of the right words. We need more coffee.
If you're chasing a Les Paul sound, stop buying Stratocasters.
Yeah, exactly.
Buy the Les Paul. This is my Les Paul of microphones. That's
exactly. It starts off with the drummer and their gear, and then your microphones, and then the stuff after that. Should we get to the playlist here? Or we got any more notes?
I had some just general processing notes.
Yeah, let's hear it.
You don't really
Slow
need a lot.
attack, fast release.
Pretty much. That's how you're going to compress it. When you're gating, I typically prefer to use an expander on the snare drum.
Yeah.
Ghost notes are important. Listen to that. You can kill a drummer's feel by cutting out their ghost notes.
I also like multiband compression on snare in order to, well, I guess it would be, multiband expander, to get rid of the hi-hat noise when the snare's not being hit. So that you're ducking above, I don't know.
Did you ever
like 6K almost
watch the Bo Burchell like flip the phase gate trick for a snare?
No, that sounds amazing.
On YouTube, it's pretty cool. So you basically duplicate your snare track.
The top and bottom?
Top.
Okay.
Because most of the drum's going to filter out a lot of the hi-hat bleed from the snare bottom. And then the only thing you really have to worry on the snare bottom mic is your kick bleed, which you're going to high pass out for the most part anyway.
Yeah.
If I remember it correctly, you duplicate the snare top and you use your stock compressor, because more than likely it's the fastest compressor you have, and you threshold all the way down, attack, fast, slow, release, I believe, and you're basically creating a brick wall limiter. And then you high pass all of the body, so it's just the snare bleed, or it's just like
the bleed.
It's just the washiness of the hi-hats, and then you flip the phase. So you're phasing out.
You're phase canceling the
bleed,
hi-hat,
yeah.
basically. Does that work?
I haven't tried it because I watched it and I was like, I don't know what this means. like
this is black magic. What is this sorcery?
And then he did it in the video and I was like, oh shit.
Did you say Bo Burchell?
Yeah, from Sayerson. Yeah. Phenomenal mix engineer,
I'll have
too.
to check that. He's crazy. I remember when I tried to watch his Sayerson Nail the Mix, this was like years ago.
I think it's from that session.
Yeah, when it was like years ago, and so I was still just trying to figure things out, and he started talking about, he went on like for like an hour and a half about phase, and I zoned out, because at that point I was just like, dude, I don't even know what an EQ does yet.
Yeah,
so this was just like, it was too over my head, so I do want to get back into that.
That was a sweet trick.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah, I don't, it's so weird to say, but it's like the drummer that I've recorded most is me. Because I
think most of us recorder, if we're also musicians, which again, I think we've mentioned that before. Like, I don't really know any engineers that aren't also musicians. Well, I know one.
I know a couple.
We know a couple, and it's weird.
It's strange.
It's just weird. It's like you hang out with them too, and they're just.
Yeah.
You're not a real person, aren't you?
No. You're made up.
Apologies to any of you out there that are really good engineers and don't play an instrument at all.
Yeah, I would love to record other people. It's just, I have to fit. I'm in that weird struggle where I have to fit client recordings around my live schedule, and that's like my work schedule.
And I think the other thing is
hectic.
too, it's like, if somebody's paying you, you don't want to waste, and especially if they're paying you by the hour, you don't want to then be like, well, this is my time to experiment, so screw you guys.
Yeah.
Like, you do that on yourself if you've got the ability, like, messing around with guitar, or if you've got a friend. Fortunately, I've got Adam. Adam has me.
Yeah.
I've got my band that I can mess around with. So of course, find people and be like, hey, I just want to experiment with different miking techniques. You want to come over for a couple hours?
Yeah, so luckily I have an engineer's mind and a drummer's mind, so I can, when I record myself, I'll experiment and I won't charge clients for it, but most of my home drum recording is me recording me, just throwing that out there. I am available for remote drum sessions if anybody needs anything. Hit me up. One little mix trick is I've been automating the snare verb down when the vocals and the vocal reverbs are in the mix. And then when the vocal stops, I'll kind of push it back up.
Do you have any we'll use this term. Do you have any clickbaity frequencies that you like? I mean, like with kick drum, it's like, 60 hertz, boost the 8K or 10K, pull out 400. Do you have any general purpose, like you typically find that boosting this frequency or cutting this frequency works on your average sounding snare, not anything very specific?
I will, if you phrased it to me as like, if I'm building, like I do a live show file where like I go down my input list and I just put my general EQ moves and I can just, it's set.
It'll get you in the ballpark. You're going to have to fine-tune based on that, but your
so if you just put me in front of Pro Tools and said, or if I just imported my last, like, snare mix chain, I'm probably high passing up to 100 or 125.
Okay.
Give or take. I'm probably boosting somewhere between 200 and 250, depending on the tuning of the drum. I'm probably scooping out 300 to 600. That really depends on tuning, and the size of the drum. So that boxiness that sometimes you get with a snare. Yeah, I'm boosting 800 to 1K, somewhere in that range. Again, tuning and snare size dependent. And then, boosting somewhere around 7 to 8.
Yeah. I was going to say pretty much the same thing for me, too. I also, careful, though, when you're boosting that 1K range.
Yeah.
If you're finding that your snare, and not, I shouldn't say don't be careful because, again, I feel like, for me, snare is very important. You know, it is the backbone of the drums along with, like, the kick. If you're finding that your snare is disappearing when, if you get to a chorus and you've got heavy guitars, I just blanked. Sidechain.
Yeah.
Sidechain, compress the 1K range on your guitars when the snare hits because then, and very fast, very release so that it just ducks really quick when that snare hits. It's not even audible. You're not going to notice it. But, that kind of range because, again, like Adam said, that area is where a lot of that kind of attack and crack is in the snares, between that 9 to 2K range, I'd say, anywhere in there maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's all
around there.
Yeah.
So kind of find where with your snare drum that is sitting and
the
then
snare is a very
duck that in the
open-ended-
guitars whenever it hits. I think that I've
open-ended
done that and it's
conversation.
just, oh my God, there it is.
Yeah, just get it to push through a little bit.
Sidechain, sidechain.
Yeah, I like the meats in the 250, the kind of like crack is in that 800 to 2K range, and then, your sizzle is in the 6 to 7 or 8.
Make it sizzle like bacon, people.
Boom. Bacony
Boom.
snare drums. Use the length of the ring musically.
Ooh, I like that.
Tie it together, or your reverb time. I like to usually carry it through to the next quarter note
I dig
or
that.
snare hit, depending on the vibe of the song.
Yeah, and you could have that change between the parts too. If you've got a very fast verse, you got chuck chuck chukka chukka chukka, and then you've got a more open chorus.
Yeah. I like the typical R&B plate on like a rim click. I know we didn't even talk about rim clicks at all. They're important.
Yeah, I feel like that's very important, but
not.
We've got a million episodes. In the books
we'll do one later. If someone needs to hear about rim clicks that bad, we'll do one.
And if you're looking for our rim clicks on our OnlyFans, check that out. OnlyFans.com/Phoenix Johnson. We didn't put it in the podcast name.
What's the longest time you've spent like mixing a snare drum, like in one song?
I plead the fifth.
Okay.
Too long.
Yep.
Too long. Yeah, that's. I probably.
What could you have? Is it one that you recorded yourself?
Yeah.
What could you have fixed?
I could have changed the head on the snare drum.
Okay.
It could have been a million things, but honestly, yeah, changing the head and the tuning of the drum. Because if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it was probably a 57. So I know it wasn't
More than
really
likely,
that.
yeah. It was used
It was really just the snare itself, and I think the problem was too is I think everybody says this, but again, it's so true. Don't try to fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
If when you're tracking that, and if you go, man, the snare is not sounding the way I want, figure out, do it right then and there, because you're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to change the sound of that snare drum. You can make more of what's there or take out some of what's there, but you're not going to fundamentally change the sound of that snare drum in the mix without samples. Now, if you know in your head that you're gonna be like, well, I'm gonna sample replace it anyways, then like, sure, gung ho, who cares what it sounds like?
Just make sure your samples are in phase with your direct mics if you're sweetening, or make sure they're in phase with your overheads if you're replacing.
Yeah.
Because if not, your snare will sound like it twists when it's hit. Yeah. Like it'll just sound like, just imagine like a wet towel being wrung.
Oh,
That's
man,
what the snare
if we ever do like a phase episode, I just did a great recording. Well, I didn't just do this recording. I did this recording like 2 years ago, and like because of the whole pandemic thing, I've been doing this album with this guy, and it's taken us 2 years just because the pandemic and money and stuff like that. But we did this recording, and I fucked up.
Oh yeah.
Now granted, what's cool about this is it's like an electronic album, but then we did one acoustic song, and my direct mics are not in phase with my room mics.
Yeah.
I butchered it. This was like 2.5, almost 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
But what I will say is I did something pretty fucking cool with it, where he is not they are not a great musician. Most of their stuff is electronic, so
Right.
they're not really a guitar player. They learn these chords to do this song. They're not a singer.
Right.
They are a vocalizer. They're not a singer. So I lucked out in that I used the phasiness to my advantage to kind of create a really cool effect. I ended up
Lean into it.
I
you
did.
know?
I leaned into it. I think that's the thing. Honestly, I thought about you a lot in terms of the way that you use your rooms as your main tracks a lot.
Yeah.
And I listened to my room track, and my room track was great, honestly. Like
Yeah.
that room track I had, my left and rights, it was like, damn, if this was the only track I had, I could make this work, but I still had some direct mics. And so I mixed the rooms, and I was like, this is a great mix. This sounds really awesome, actually, for just being 2 microphones. But then I was like, I actually thought it was a little too clear because of the way this guy performed, and I think with the vibe of the song, it could be a little painful because it was a painful song.
Yeah,
It's a song about betrayal, and I was like, I'm gonna lean into this. So I used some of these direct mics in and out to create a little bit of phasiness, to create this like almost this effect of like, wow, like when you're going through something emotional, you kind of
It's disorienting.
It's disorienting, exactly.
Yeah, I
So-
like it when not snare related, but like when really like intimate songs, I like it when the vocals are a little rough. Like I'll try to track those last.
Yeah.
When the voice is a little worn, because it just sounds more earnest.
I will berate my vocalists. I will make them cry before we sing. Like, sing now.
Check this out. I'm going to tie it back together. If it's an emotional song, I want their vocal cords to sound like a drum head that doesn't have any more coating. Boom. Let's talk about snare sounds we like.
All right. The Backseat playlist. All right. Again, everybody, check us out on Patreon/Backseat playlist or Reflections Artist Collective.
Yes.
But you can find our playlists every week. You can find those.
Spotify, iTunes, here on video-wise, looking at you people on YouTube.
We'll put the links
In the
to those
descriptions.
in the description. So that'll be, if you're on our Patreon, you can see the links there.
Yep.
If you're on the YouTube, you can see the links there. Can you, if you're in the Spotify
Yeah,
app,
I can.
you can link the playlist?
I'm pretty sure I can link them. Yeah, if you're an Apple Podcast listener, there will be an Apple Music link to songs we like for every episode. The whole thing that I forgot to mention in this reboot is just sharing music that we're digging on. I used to play a game with some friends where just like, you'd walk in and be like, what were the 5 songs you listened to on the way here? And we would talk about that, and I was like, that's a good idea for a podcast thing. So for this, we're doing, kick drum sounds we like, or today we're doing snare drum sounds. So each playlist will be in the description of wherever you are watching or listening, and there will be a link to the music listening platform of your choice. If you need to, I will burn you a cassette and mail it. Patreon.com/Reflections Artist Collective. Be sure to hit the burnt cassette tier because they are expensive. So
No, we were going to literally send you a cassette that we lit on fire.
there's some overhead if you need the cassettes. So, we're trying to get vinyl. It's just vinyl's behind. So weekly vinyl playlists for music that we don't own the rights to is a little difficult.
All right, so today, do we want to do the back and forth thing, or do we want to go through
Yeah,
our whole
go
do
back and forth. Did you limit it to 5?
I did limit it to 500. Oh my
Okay,
God, you're still counting.
You go
Jeez.
first.
Let me go first. You're like, I didn't.
I
didn't
narrowed
stick
it
to
down from 50 to 8. So.
Oh my God. All right. My first one, honestly, this has got to be my favorite snare drum in the context of an album. It's not a snare drum I would use,
Okay.
but this is my favorite snare drum in the context of an album. If this snare drum wasn't on this album, it wouldn't be the same album. But the song, at least, Burn It Down by Avenged Sevenfold off of City of Evil.
Okay.
I get so much joy out of that snare drum. It is so high-pitched.
It is tight.
It's so tight. It is awesome. It is just... I love that snare drum. Every time I hear it, it's just... It cuts through the mix. It cracks. It pops. It's just... I feel like because of the pitch of it and because higher pitches... They oscillate faster.
Yeah.
I feel like because of that and because the songs on that record are very high tempo.
Yeah,
it does something by being high pitched.
Yeah.
It gets out of the way, but it's still there every time. It doesn't take up a lot of room in the mix, but it's just
the groovy fat snare drum's not going to be your go-to for like speed metal.
and it just and it blends so well with the rest of that drum kit.
Yeah.
It's a
He
great
has a
sound.
very high-tuned drum kit, but it works.
Yeah, and he doesn't do that on any of the records prior or after that. That record had
City
just
of Evil, yeah.
yeah, that their best record, Vincent Fold, City of Evil. That record is incredible. But that snare drum, that is one of my all-time. That was my number one on here. I was just like, without a doubt, when we talked about snares, I said, City of Evil.
All right, number one for me, Invincible by Tool off the new album, newish, most recent album, Fear Inoculum. Most of the time, Danny Carey plays with the snare wires off, which is a fun little effect. I forgot to mention this in the educational, if you'll call it, that portion of the podcast. If you like the way your snare's tuned, but it's not as like singy in the mix, but it's not a tuning or playing problem, do the track with the snare wires on and then do another pass where the drummer takes the snare wires off and then just hit the main notes in time.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, because then you're getting just the pitch of the snare drum back on that extra take, and then you don't have to tuck in a sample to get something else. You're just adding that drum. You're reinforcing that drum with itself.
That's awesome.
So you have
that's
the
really
like
cool.
the bitey, cracky attack of the drum, and then you have the more like singy.
Do you find though that you need to edit the timing just a little bit to make sure
Yeah,
that you're not getting a flam, basically?
Yeah, you're gonna have to go in post and time align it. And
maybe you could use that as a cool effect though to create a flam in a way.
Yeah, if your snare sounds good but it needs more
chutzpah.
Yeah, just some more sauce. Maybe it's not a reverb, maybe it's not a room sample. Like
T-shirt idea: snare drum, bottle of sauce. Put some sauce on it.
Boom. Buy our shirts when we make them.
Yeah, we're gonna create a website. We'll do that soon. We're gonna have some shirts for sale. All right.
But there's just he flips. No, it's snare wires off. There's a breakdown groovy
the
part.
snare wires are off. Are they also miking the bottom of the snare still?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, snare off's cool. It's tribally and more percussive.
Oh yeah.
It's experiment with it. It's cool sometimes. I did a drum session once where I said to the engineer who recorded me, I was like, "Yo, I'm gonna turn the snare wires off on this," and they're like, "That's why? No, don't do that." I was like, "Trust me." Like for the drum fills, just trust me. And they were like, "Yep, that was the right call."
Nice.
So yeah, you have the option.
So number 2 for me, I feel like I'm realizing now that I wrote my snare my list of snares in terms of highest pitch to lowest pitch.
Nice.
So number 2, my boy Dave Matthews Band, Ants Marching. That intro, pop, pop. I love that snare. I love the snare on a lot of their music, but that album in particular.
Carter Beauford do be good at
that. I do love that high pitched snare.
Yeah.
I really like in that style of music. I don't know what you call it. There's like a
groove rock, jammy.
Because there's rock, there's blues, there's R&B.
Just a jam band.
But it's awesome. I love that high pitch snare drum sound that still has a little bit of. It's not crack. It's more of like a splat. There's like a splat with a high pitchness to it. And especially because of the way that song starts off, where it is that drum beat and that snare is the focal point. I feel like it's just it's a really unique sound that I think if it were just your standard fat rock drum, it wouldn't get that same lift and excitement that song starts off with. When that that snare adds to it. It adds to that melody in a way. So I think that's a great example of a snare drum that maybe by itself you'd be like, but in the context of the mix, again, it's just it lifts that whole performance.
There's no right or wrong snare sound. So just like, if anything, we're encouraging people to experiment with, especially the snare. It's
make sure there's some body to it.
Yeah.
I just don't want attack anymore. I don't want just attack. And so
bring it back.
Bring back the attack.
Yes.
BBTA. Bring back the attack.
It should be bring back that attack. That would rhyme better. Yeah.
Right.
It's me again.
It is you again. Hey, it's me again.
Drum album
Styx reference
tones that I love.
That was not Styx. Hold on. I gotta rewind. That was not a Styx reference.
Adele.
No, shoot.
The
Oh my God.
Doors.
No, Cheap Trick. Sorry, Cheap Trick reference.
Yep, went over my head.
Yep, back to Adam's thing. Sorry, I had to not make a fool of myself, which
Album of drum tones that I love so much that they're burned in my body. A Perfect Circle, The Noose. When the snare drum comes in that song, it is perfect. It's got
I wish we could play these songs on air.
yeah,
That'd be
it's
great,
got
so
a
we
little bit
kinda-
of body, good amount of crack to it, but it's also very natural sounding at the same time. I just love it.
Hell yeah.
Love it so much.
Love it, love it, love it. Number 3 for me, and again, right in the middle there, I think this is a really good, maybe a little much for your standard rock stuff, but anything that leans, I'd say, in the heavy side, heavy rock, heavy metal. Carousel by Haken. Anything off their recent record, Virus. I think all those drums, mixed by Nolly, my favorite engineer.
Yeah.
I think he's got that, just about mastered that really nice balance between natural drum tone, but still getting that intensity.
Processing it to get the punch, yeah.
Yeah, so I think he does a really good balance. You've got someone like, like Will Putney, who does just the most insane drum mixes where it's just like more than real.
Yeah.
And then, on the other end, you've got, I don't know, more, I'll say Foo Fighters, where it's like that, really very real sounding drums. And I feel like in the middle, you've got, something like what Nolly does. We've got some nice punch, some nice...
best of both worlds, yeah.
Yeah, you get that nice blend. And so I think, for me, in the style that I work with a lot, that is like the snare drum that I aim for, I would say.
Yeah.
Again, song dependent, but that one is going to be a nice in the middle. It doesn't have any kind of character that makes you go, whoa, that's really unique, but it just sits. It anchors the song.
All right, cool. Song 3 for me. This is so tough. I love and hate snare drums. I feel like a good middle of the road, like just rock snare, is off of Thrice's Yellow Belly, off of the album Major Minor.
Yeah, that's a great one.
It's just got a very... Nothing's hiding it. There's not a whole lot of... I mean, there's like a kiss of reverb on it just in the background.
I love all their snares. I love all their drum tones. Even going back to Artists in the Ambulance, that's got a great snare sound.
Yeah, this one was the most kind of like... It was recorded like a grunge album back in the 90s, but it was done in a more modern way, so it's kind of the best of both worlds of stuff that I like. And it fits the groove well, and it's, it's the first song on the album, so it kind of just sets the attitude. But it's got body, it's got bite, it's got punch. It doesn't have a lot of pop. I would, you're like your Travis Barker snare sounds and stuff like that. I would consider that more of like a poppy sounding snare.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to describe it.
Where it's just like, this one has crack and some sizzle and some body, and it drives it. Like, it's my perfect, that and the Noose are my like middle of the road snares, where they're just, if you're close to that, it'll work.
I dig it. Another one, kind of still in the rock genre, but also kind of gearing in more to pop. I might have done this song before already. I don't think so. I know I've done the band, but One True Prince by Don Broco. My last 2 songs, this one and the next one, are kind of cheating because they're 2 different snares.
Hey, sometimes that works.
And I love it because in the chorus, like the opening, when the full band is kicked in, it's clearly I think it's a sample. I'm pretty sure it's a sample because it hits the same exact way every time.
Yep,
and it's like, I mean, there might be a real drum in there, but it has got crack. It's really ringy. I wouldn't say really ringy, but the ringiness is controlled, and that's why I'm like, man, that's got to be sweetened or that's a sample. But it's a beautiful sound because it just, when it hits, it's got a little bit slower tempo to the song, but it drives, and so when that snare hits, it explodes. Like, it is an explosive sounding snare, and so would not work in a faster tempo song. No. Definitely would not. But for something like this, it's huge. And what I love about this song and this record in particular is that they are rock. They are a rock band, but they are very much pop inspired in their production. And this is a snare that you could easily hear on a pop record, but within a different context. You might not see it the same. So I really appreciate it. And then when it goes into the verse, it's a definitely electronic snare. It's almost the complete opposite of it. There's no ring. It's that quick, punchy sound, but it doesn't have a lot of velocity to it because the whole song
kind of
comes
dropping
down.
the
whole song drops down into this soft little groove, and so it's this really awesome balance of very quiet,
Yeah.
closed in short snare to then this gigantic explosion. It's really cool.
Nice. Well, I did some, more cliche, like stereotypical rock snares. So, I'm gonna go with a fatter, lower mixed snare. The Gold by Manchester Orchestra off the album Black Mile to the Surface. It's not really in your face, but their drummer likes to use the big fat snare drum pads. And it's fat and low and groovy, and there's a cool thing that happens in that song where in the one verse they automate out the top head, so it's just the bottom.
Ooh,
And
that's
then,
really, really cool.
And then when the next chorus hits, the snare top comes back in.
I love that. That's such a awesome. I feel like there are so many different examples we could use of that, but I think not using it. If you record a bunch of mics, obviously if you've got a lot of inputs, record them.
Sure.
But you don't have to use all of them. That's been told to me music time, but I think that's a really great example of not necessarily not using all of them, but in certain parts, maybe like how are you trying to get a dynamic? You're trying to get a really
because the
cool
groove's
thing,
still the same, but the song needed to drop.
Take out one of those mics. That's really cool. I've got actually a couple things I'm going home and try now with that.
I think they automated out the kick in, the snare top, and probably the rooms. And then when the chorus hit back in, snare top, kick in, rooms are back, and it elevates it enough. It's a pretty it's a faster-ish tempo, but it's still a very relaxed and atmospheric song. But it's just proof that, that snare is pretty quiet in the mix too, but it does. This is a case of the snare's not driving the song; it's providing the feel of it.
Yeah,
or
it's
not
the rudder
as
in the water.
face. Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So when you do a crazy automation like that, where you take out the snare top, the volume's still relatively the same because it's not in your face. It's more about
it all of a sudden doesn't disappear in a way.
Yeah.
It's just tonally it changes.
Yeah. So, the snare, a mistake that I would always make is my kick and snare would just be way too hot in the mix. So pulling it back a little bit provides you room to do some of these more creative things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My last one, and I saved this one for last because it's not a original snare drum sound. It's not a snare drum sound that you're like, wow, I've never heard that before. But it is a snare drum sound that you would rarely ever hear in a heavy metal mix like this.
Okay.
The song just came out. Dimorphous Display by Loathe. Loathe is one of my favorite bands right now.
Yeah.
I don't know who engineered this one. I forget. George Lever did their earlier stuff, but I don't know who did this one. But it is a heavy metal mix through and through, but it's got an electronic, 80s 808 drum sample sound. The snare is just this short.
That's cool.
And it's causing a lot of discussion in some of the community about this is a horrible drum sound because it's so different. And so it's one of those polarizing ones where if you really don't like it, you don't like it. But for me, it's brilliant because it's taking, a common drum sound that's used in a certain genre of music and then putting it with this other one. And I think it's a vibe. I think it's amazing. It creates such a unique feel to this song.
Yeah.
That band already stands out as it is, just through their arrangements and through their writing. But it just takes them one more step to another level where you're like, oh, man, I know this is nobody else. You can tell. And I think that's really important. I think for everything that you're recording, I think a lot of the times, especially if you're trying to make it in the mainstream as an artist, as a producer, if you're going for avant-garde, do whatever the hell you want. If you do not care,
there are literally no rules.
There are no rules, but I think there are certain times. I think a lot of the times you do need to pick certain elements where you're going to go, hey, we're going to use the same element that everybody else does because that's what people are used to hearing.
They're familiar with it, yeah.
And you kind of need to because if every element of your mix is pulling from something different, I will say it can be a little jarring, and it will then end up in that avant-garde space where, a lot of people are just going to be like, what's going on here? But what I love about them is the guitar tones, heard those guitar tones. Everything you've heard before in their mix, but they've chosen the drums as the one element for this mix to be that different thing that stands out, and I think creates a feel. Sometimes it might be a guitar, sometimes it might be the vocal, but in this, they chose the snare drum and the kick drum, and I think it's wonderful.
Gotta love the creativity.
Always. I appreciate creativity.
Yeah. I mean, people want to be purists, especially like people who are a little bit older than us who didn't come up in the digital age of music. But then, like, I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty is an 808 programmed hi-hat.
Yeah.
And they just did kick and snare, probably as overdubs. So
and it's awesome.
If fucking Tom Petty can use a drum machine.
Exactly. I think it's so cool. Experiment with that stuff. It's so much fun, and it breaks up the monotony, It takes something that could be, hey, this is a good song, to this is a great song.
Yeah. The Johnny Cash song, God's Gonna Cut You Down, where it's got the stomp and the clap.
Yeah.
Like, if that were just a kick and a snare, it wouldn't be as cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Not my playlist pick, but I gotta round it out. There are other snares that would probably fit in my list better, but if I don't say Before I Forget by Slipknot, because I own the Joey Jordison snare.
I love that snare.
It's so good.
Oh my God, when we play out with Nick, for those of you who don't know, it's blues,
Americana
blues, folk,
roots,
Americana
blues.
roots, and Adam rolls up with the Joey Jordison snare like half the time, and people are like, bro, what snare are you using? It sounds amazing. He goes, Slipknot, and the look on people's faces are just, what?
And it's an in-your-face. It's got the tribal S's on it. It's my favorite snare.
It sounds so good. It's so versatile. It's amazing.
It can be fat. It can be snappy. It can do the Slipknot
I think,
thing.
honestly, because I've been in the market for buying a snare, I think I'm going to buy that one just because of how much I've heard it. I'm just like, dude, that snare is just so good.
You could just always borrow mine.
Yeah, but, I think some things, you just kind of want to own,
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe.
I feel like we played a festival gig with Nick where the band after us, the drummer forgot the snare drum. Were you on stage when I was like, you can use mine, and then they saw it was a Slipknot one, and they're like, nope.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it was just like...
I was like, seriously? And they're like, yep, nope, not doing it.
It's like, dude, did you even hear it? You would never guess based on the way it looks.
Have fun playing your set without your snare then. And how many records has your band sold? Because this snare sound has sold like 10 million.
Dude, and what's great too, because it's like how you have it tuned, again, it just goes to show the drum heads, the snare wires.
Use a different drum head for Nick than I do when I'm doing rock stuff.
It does not sound like Slipknot at that point, the way that Adam has it set up, but it just, regardless of how you set it up, that drum sounds damn good. Yeah.
And I found it used for like cheap.
I always find that like signature stuff is always just kind of like, it's not great. But then you've got those few gems like that you're like, oh my God, like you might.
R.I.P. By the way, someone's like, you should sell your snare now that he died, and I was like, no.
Oh, because you make good money off. I was like, I was just like, well, he's dead now, so why do you even want it? I was like, what?
No, someone's like, it's probably gone up in value, and I was like, I love it too much.
Yeah.
Like, if you said, your house is burning down, and you can only grab one drum-related thing. Like, I'm grabbing my Joey Jordison snare.
It's like I've told that to our buddy Mike. He's got one of the original 5150 block letters before they switched to actual EVH, like one of the PV ones. So I think it's something in the Transformers that they did differently, and it does have a different sound. I'm just like, Mike, if you ever decide that you are broke or need money, like, give me like a day's heads up so I can take a loan out so I can buy that from you, because you are not getting rid of that amp. Like, I don't, it's like when Eddie died, like, I think the prices on those, the prices on those are already skyrocketed just because they only made a few.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate the like, well, this person died, so now it's worth more. And it's like, nope, there were still only 500 of that guitar ever made, so it's not any less rare.
Yeah, but it's just like, there are those few items that, like, friends or people have, and you're like, never sell that. If you keep it in the family,
and,
because that's
okay. Another home recording hack is, as you've just heard Phoenix and I say, don't buy what your good friends own. They'll let you borrow it. You might have to give them $20 and a case of beer,
or a favor with body parts. But
you'll have to give them a tattoo or something. I don't know.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Barter. Treat your friend circle well.
Yep.
All right, cool. Should we do official housekeeping? Because we've got our one critique from a listener is that we don't do housekeeping enough.
Again, we check us out on Patreon at Reflections Artists Collective. There you can find all the links for our, for the podcast on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts, YouTube.
We got cool tiers, and we'll have, the more people sign up, the more we will be willing to fulfill the demands.
Yeah, check out the actual playlist of the songs. Those will be on Apple, those will be on Spotify.
Links in the description.
Follow
us on Instagram at Reflections Artist Collective. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Reflections Artist Collective.
Are we still running just because I'm gonna air this dirty laundry live, is the Backseat playlist itself. Are we still running that Instagram, or is everything being funneled to?
Everything's going to be funneled
Okay,
to
so
Reflections
yes.
Artist Collective.
Yeah, follow us at Reflections Artist Collective.
It just makes more sense. Search us. You can search Backseat Playlist, but there will be a lot more nerd content now that we have gained some momentum.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna shoot some videos. We're gonna be back here in the studio on Friday doing some more stuff.
Yeah.
We're launching this, baby.
It's
We
gonna
are
be
going to the freaking moon.
The moon of niche.
We're gonna hit 2022 goal. We're gonna hit the freaking moon. 2023, we're gonna be a fucking Jupiter, baby.
Space hotel.
We are aiming for Uranus.
All I wanted was healthcare, and we get a fucking space hotel.
I don't know. I'm down with the space hotel.
That's cool.
I don't care. I'll lose my kidney. Who needs it?
You only need one.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Snares.
Snares, we did it. Crack, crack, baby.
You hate them until you find the one that you love. And
when do these podcasts drop? Are we doing a weekly thing?
Weekly.
Weekly. What days can people check this out?
Released every Friday, unless you're a member of the Patreon, where
Get it early.
maybe now it's Wednesday, but little behind the scenes peek behind the curtain is we're gonna stockpile these, so the Patreon peeps will probably start getting them on Mondays.
So stay
A
tuned,
whole
Patreon.
4 business days ahead of the rest, and they're longer. You get to see us funnel through tech errors as we try to set this up.
You get to see me talk to the camera by myself when Adam leaves me alone, unattended. What is Phoenix going to do? What am I going to do? He's going to start talking about myself in the third person. That's what's going to happen. You'll see the after show, because we will have an after show party.
Every time.
It's probably just me and Adam holding each other crying.
What did we
made it
talk
through.
about?
But yeah, follow us, like, subscribe, comment. Please share.
Tell your friends.
Share. We'll probably start doing a monthly. Maybe we'll add a monthly
playlist of
fan submitted ones. Maybe at the end of each month, we'll ask for fans playlist, and then we'll release it at the beginning of the month, and we'll let it stay up on.
And you know what? Let's just throw it out there now. Starting in March, we will be doing monthly live streams on the Patreon.
Hey! Subscribe! Let us get that sound thing. If hashtag Phoenix wants a sound thing.
Phoenix wants to make the sounds. All right, this has been 2 hours. You guys have had enough of us.
I'm Phoenix.
I am Adam.
This has been the Backseat Playlist.
Episode something.
3.
Boom. Love it.